I reviewed the Redmi Note 13 6 months ago. Since then, its price has changed, at least here in Nigeria. Other phones have been released around the same price point and is finally getting the HyperOS update. So I thought, hey, why don't we take a look at it again? The first thing I want to talk about is pricing. 6 months ago, when I first reviewed this phone, it was selling for a little over 200,000. Now it's selling for 275. So yeah, it actually increased in price, which is strange. Now, of course, this is just a Naira issue. So for those outside Nigeria, you don't really have to be bothered about this. The Note 13's price probably stayed the same. Anyway, just as a refresher, here are the specs. It's got the Snapdragon 685 processor. We get up to 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. It has a 120Hz 1080p AMOLED display, a 108 megapixel main camera, 16 megapixel selfie camera, a 5000 mAh battery, and I think 33 watts of wired charging. All of this for about $160. In terms of specs on paper and pricing, the Note 13 is okay. It takes a more balanced approach. Like, it doesn't have the best camera, but it has a good camera. It doesn't have the fastest processor, but it has a processor that's fast enough. It might not have the best battery life, but its battery would still last you a whole day. You get the point. Its specs wouldn't blow you away. They're not the best, but they're still solid. And really, all of this just goes to show that there's a lot of competition in this $150 price segment, which is a good thing. I'll definitely recommend that you subscribe because I would soon be dropping my best budget phones to buy video, which I do every year. That promises to be interesting. So, subscribe so you don't miss that. But until then, you could definitely still go watch my review video, which I dropped 6 months ago. In that video, I go in depth about my experience with the Note 13. I talk about all the specs, all the features. And yeah, really everything I said in that video still stands. The only thing that's different is software. It took about 5 months, but yeah, the Redmi Note 13 has finally gotten the HyperOS Android 14 update. Okay, so what's new with HyperOS? The first and most visible change is with lock screen customization. Just like with the iPhone, you can now tap and hold on your lock screen to change it. Pretty straightforward. When it comes to creating new lock screens, there are 2 styles you can choose from. Within those 2 styles, there are even more options, of course, and then you can go further and customize those options. You can change your wallpaper with the many different options available, or your photo gallery. You can apply filters. There are a couple of them. And then there's something called the matte effect. It kind of blurs the wallpaper. Looks cool. You can also edit the clock style, edit the fonts, and change the color of the fonts. Android 14 style. But what I really like is that whatever changes you make to your lock screen would be applied to the always on display. I really like that. One thing that would have been cool though is if there was a nice seamless transition from the always on display to the lock screen. Hopefully they add that with an update. Not sure what they're calling this, but when you plug in your phone, there's this nice new dynamic island inspired animation that plays. You also see this animation when you turn on DND or silent mode. I also noticed a little change with multitasking, specifically split screen multitasking. It's a little more intuitive. So let's say you want to use the settings and gallery app at the same time. When you open up the 2 apps, you notice that there's this options icon right in the middle, which you could use to swap positions of the apps, open up an app as a floating window, and even close an app. Like I said, more intuitive. HyperOS also brings changes to the control panel. The layout's a little different, texts have been removed, there's a media player right there in the control center, and you can also now long press shortcuts and open up pop-up windows for them, kind of like on iOS. HyperOS is also supposed to be significantly lighter than MIUI. It's supposed to take up less storage and make the phone ideally smoother to use. But personally, I didn't really notice any difference. Even with that said, on a general note, the Note 13 now feels newer. Like, this update has just made the phone feel newer, which is cool. My experience so far has been pretty good. I haven't experienced any major bugs or issues. The only downside to this update that I've noticed is the bunch of extra bloatware. Amazon Music, Amazon Shopping, Booking.com, and a bunch of other apps were just installed. These apps can be uninstalled, so not that big a problem. Okay, so what do I think of the Redmi Note 13 6 months later? I still really like it. I think it's a really good phone for $160, and if you go ahead and buy this, you wouldn't be disappointed. If you're looking for a phone that's a bit balanced, a phone that's good at like everything, then you probably land on the Note 13. It's not outrightly the best phone to buy for $160, but you can make an argument for it. Anyway, that's it. Those are my thoughts on the Redmi Note 13 6 months later. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for future videos, and I'll see you when you see me.